round eyes that stare owlishly forward. An observer stated that the boots and eyes make him appear bound to the earth. Now the other human forms have their heads enclosed in halos of radiance. Thus they appear otherworldly and seem to radiate light. Dr. Phyllis Pitluga, an astronomer from the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, made an intensive computer-aided study of stellar alignments at Nazca. This is a plateau with all the bird figures. And she concluded that the famous Biter figure was devised as a terrestrial diagram of the giant constellation of Orion. And the arrow straight lines linked to the figure appear to have been set out to track through the ages the changing declinations of the three stars of Orion's belt. Remember I talked about Orion and Sirius before. Now in 1530 AD, Piri Reis, an admiral in the navy of the Ottoman Turks, copied a map that he probably obtained from the Imperial Library at Constantinople. On July 6, 1960, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer of the United States Air Force sent the Piri Reis map, world map, somewhere to Professor Hapgood at King College, New Hampshire, for evaluation of certain unusual features. Now the coastline, here's the map, copy of the map, right here. And the coastline of Antarctica, as shown on this map, agreed very remarkably with the seismic profile made across the top of the ice cap by a Swedish-British Antarctic expedition in 1949. The agreement indicated that this coastline here in the Piri Reis map was mapped or drawn before Antarctica was covered by ice. So it shows that it was drawn before it was covered by ice. So Professor Hapgood submitted the map and other ancient maps to Richard Streatham of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for an estimate of the level of mathematics employed in the original source map. Now, whoever this was at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology concluded that this map had to be drawn with a coordination, with a trigonometric coordination method, and precision instruments must have been used. And he suggests that the original map was drawn as much as 15,000 years ago. So now, this is in Mexico. I think this is from Mexico City, both of those. Tiahuanaca. Some of you might have been there. It's about 133 miles northwest of Mexico City. It contains the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, and it's a Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. Now, no one knows the exact date of that pyramid construction, but local legend asserts that they were built by giants to transform men into gods. Now, the pyramid forms an exact terrestrial diagram of the three belt stars in the constellation of Orion. So do the pyramids in Egypt. And so did some of these drawings here align with Orion. And that's still the same one. They say, we three kings of Orion are. So what I'm trying to say is all ancient people recognized Orion. Now, most researchers stated that pyramids were part of an ancient science that is no longer understood. Now, some researchers and engineers think the pyramids of Tiahuanaca, those are the ones in Mexico, might have been used to read location and strength of earthquakes around the globe. The pyramids of Tiahuanaca contain materials, notably mica, which probably came from Brazil, some 2,000 miles away. Now, mica is currently used in the construction of capacitors and is valued as a thermal and electrical insulator. It is opaque to vast neutrons and can act as a moderator in nuclear reactions. Some researchers state that the pyramid of the sun functioned as a perennial clock, precisely signaling the equinoxes. They state that the builders had an enormous volume of astronomic and geodetic data. Now, Casey's readings indicate that communications and transportation were highly developed in Atlantis. He says, in a land known as Pisidia, a musician in the temple produced sounds on all nature on the instruments. And he says that the Atlantean civilization was much higher than today's civilization. He says, in Atlantean land, when people understood the law of universal force, entity was able to carry messages through space to the other lands, guided crafts of that period. In Atlantis, during higher status civilization, teacher of psychological thought and study, especially that of transmission of thought through ether. So in other words, they could send their thoughts, because ether just means the air, the atmosphere, and it transmits waves, it transmits radio waves, and the Atlanteans used it to transfer their thoughts. Here's another one that Casey says, in Pisidia, the entity dwelled among those that had charge of the storage of the motivative forces from the great crystals that so condensed the lights, the forms of the activities, as to guide ships in the sea and in the air, and inconveniences of the body as television and recording voice. So he's saying the Atlanteans had television. And it's also very interesting. Casey lived in about 1935, and he said the Atlanteans were starting to incarnate into this time, or this dimension. In Atlantean land, here's one he wrote, in Atlantean land, a time of development of electrical forces that dealt with transportation or craft from place to place, photographing at a distance, reading inscriptions through walls, even at a distance, overcoming gravity itself, preparation of the crystal, the terrible, mighty crystal. Much of this brought destruction. Okay, now, painted caves in France were seldom, excuse me, now, painted caves in France were seldom living conditions, living quarters. During the Solutrean period, that's when they were making all those fancy stone tools. They were using pressure flaking. During the Solutrean period, slaves used the dark, hard-to-reach inner portions of the caves to send and receive messages. Anthropologists found undisturbed footprints in the cave, and there was no litter, suggesting that they were just only rarely visited. Almost all archaeologists who write of the caves express amazement over their almost inaccessible locations. It appears that the artists deliberately and energetically sought to execute their work on cave walls that were far removed from the outside world. Now, most of the cave art is found in the inner recesses of long, narrow caves, which must always have been extremely difficult to reach. Most often, cave art is reached only by walking and crawling on hands and knees, and frequently swimming across swift underground rivers or lakes to the innermost hovels of a cave. Sometimes it involved obvious danger to life. Even then, the artists produced their life-size images in strange, unseemly locations where they frequently could not stand back and observe their work as a whole. The caves were dark and eerie, and the artists most probably worked with only the light of torches or blubber lamps. They often use the bare, unprepared rock face, incorporating its irregularities, depressions, cracks, and hollows into their art, making them an essential part of their composition. Just look at this. I think this is, isn't it? And now this is really the head of this bull up here. They were in color when they painted it. And these are little horses going by. This is a masterpiece. I mean, this is a superb, just look at that. Look at the way those horns tilt back, and look at the bristles on his tail. It looks like, and he's hunched. You can almost see the muscles, the power in there. And then it's like this white, I just think that is just the best picture. That's just beautiful. And look at these, the antelopes, I think they are, yes. Now this is from about 17 some thousand years ago. These are these were done by slaves, and they went into those dark, narrow places. Now, artwork in the caves gives the impression that slaves mentally communicated with each other. Modern researchers stated that artwork of Concours Cave in France shows the same style as that of the Provence painter who painted Eblo Cave in the Adouz Valley, 90 miles to the northwest. Now, another researcher stated there's a striking similarity among the wall paintings throughout these caves, not just in the subjects, but in elements of style too. Each cave and shelter is unquestionably unique in composition and may also display special technical innovations, but overall they give the impression